All right, so we are so happy you guys are all here tonight. This is going to be some really valuable information that we know you guys all need to hear about. So I think you're really going to enjoy this in the sense that it's going to empower you as a family to know what you might be wanting to look into, needing to look into for the future. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Wendy Smith. She's been working with people with developmental disabilities for 35 years. She received her bachelor's degree from, I'm not sure how to say that, but Kuanata.
Juniata.
Oh,
Juniata.
College in history, and her teaching credential from, is it
Town.
Kuhnstown
Kutztown.
University. And she first worked in a summer respite program and adult life skills classes with United Cerebral Palsy in Pennsylvania before beginning to be an administrator in group homes for adults with developmental disabilities in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And Wendy moved to California and began working for Home of Guiding Hands, which you guys have likely heard about in this area, as a residential supervisor for 27 years, or 27 years ago, I should say. And then in 2005, she began supervising and growing the in-home respite program. She's also been implementing the life planning project since its inception, and it became her full-time position in 2022. I took that class. I highly recommend it. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but she presents life planning classes in both English and Spanish. And Wendy is active on communities to support information dissemination, and can regularly be found speaking about services at resource fairs throughout San Diego County and Imperial County. She's well-respected support for the IDD community, which you guys can find her at. And Wendy's also the parent of a 30-year-old son with autism. So welcome, Wendy. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And just minor correction, because I didn't really look at the date when I sent that bio, but as of today, my son is 31. Today is his birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yes, he absolutely is having a wonderful day. So thank you so much for being here and for allowing me the opportunity to come and speak about life planning and how important it is. And on the screen, you'll see the first slide is myself with my son. This is his happy face. He was happy to come in for a photo shoot, and I really enjoy having him kind of be the face of why it's so important to plan. When we talk about being a parent of a special needs child, regardless of their age, regardless of the kind of disability they may have, regardless of the areas of strength or need, there are always things that we worry about. And I think that's any parent, regardless of whether the child has a disability. But when there is a disability in the mix, it absolutely adds more complexity to the planning that's needed. And it makes it a much more emotional process. So I'm going to be talking tonight about the life planning workshops, which is really a program that is designed to help families tackle this very overwhelming, very emotional, very huge is the only adjective I can come up with, process of trying to make sure that all of the information that I, as a parent, have in my head about what works effectively for my child lives somewhere else. So if it were ever to happen to me, I am not the only one who knows important things like what the breakfast routine looks like, what kind of song we sing at nighttime, what kind of redirection is going to be effective if we happen to get stuck at something, because I recognize why we're getting stuck and how to get him out of it. That's something that I'm really good at. I've been doing it for 31 years, but how do I explain and leave the information for other people? Or how do I build supports so I'm not the only one right now who knows? Go ahead and move this slide. Next slide. So the life planning workshops are designed to provide an opportunity for families to think about the future from a couple of different perspectives. What I find so often is families aren't always planning for the future because they have so much going on right now. I'm very busy. I don't have time to think about what could happen 5 years from now. I have to focus on getting through supper time, getting to bedtime. Maybe we can talk about this weekend. We might be able to discuss next month. But 5 years from now, I'm not even going to worry about it because I have too much going on. And right now, things are okay. So let's not rock the boat. Let's keep things steady. Let's keep things moving along. But I can be in that mindset, and I look up and it's 3 years later. It's 5 years later. It's 10 years later. And now I'm still in exactly the same place that I was when I first thought about that future and I don't have time. And I'm also still in the same place because I didn't really figure out what I wanted the future to look like. So I couldn't make any decisions that moved me in that direction. So life planning is about sharing information and important information and making sure it's available, but it's also about thinking, what really does the future look like for my child? What's going to make them happy? What's going to make them fulfilled? What's going to give them a sense of self-esteem? What's going to help them feel accepted by the people that they love in their life? And that's an optimal future that I want to plan for. That's what I want to try and figure out how to create and protect and preserve and continue, even if it's not done by me. So when we think about life planning, it's a big concept. There's a lot that's involved, but it's also very much focused in the positive. In the workshop series, I think initially when we first received the grant to begin the life planning program back in 2005, it was actually geared toward much older parents who had not planned for a future when they were not going to be the caregiver. And now we're facing health issues or challenges that meant that they had to figure out some pretty soon decisions about what was going to happen, because realistically, they were looking at maybe 3 to 5 years. Once we received the grant in our initial year, we had limits as far as how young clients could be. And I kind of doubt that anybody in this call has a child that was old enough to be part of that initial year, because they had to be at least 30 years old. My son just qualifies right now. So as I began the life planning program and I was working with more senior families, I was also the parent of a young teenager. My son was 14 when I started doing the life planning workshop materials. And as I went through the materials with the families who were kind of much farther along their journey than me, I kept thinking, this is such wonderful information. Why are we only talking about it when the parents have kind of reached the end of their journey? And that's what I went to my supervisor and said, let's think about this more deeply and realize this is so much more effective if families can start thinking about what's important and what is negotiable and what are the things that they can use as foundations to build from to really create a wonderful life for their child, instead of just trying to figure out who to pass the torch to. Let's make it be more. So our actual biggest demographic nowadays are families that have children that are 16, 17 to 22, 23. When schools start giving you that speech about the transition plan and what's going to happen when they're out of school, you realize like, oh, I do have some really big decisions to make, and they can often catch families unprepared. So life planning is an opportunity for them to kind of process a lot of information through a very structured program that can be very beneficial in the pretty immediate future. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide. So what we do as far as our structure, and this is new, this is not the way that Kristen experienced this, but since the pandemic, in my opinion, one of the very few good things that came out of the pandemic is that people got much more familiar and comfortable with electronic meetings. Here we are in one right now. And what that allowed us to do was to make the life planning workshops virtual. One of the biggest issues that we always had was finding enough parents in the same geographic area that were ready to go through the process at the same time. Because just because you know it's a good idea, this is not something that automatically feels like, oh yeah, let me sign up. It's like, oh, I don't want to think about when I'm going to die. So people have to be ready in a lot of ways to participate. But when we can have a virtual group, it doesn't matter if they all live close to each other. As long as I have enough people that are interested at the same time, we can get a group and they can meet virtually, and it doesn't matter where they are geographically. So our life planning workshops are held virtually in small groups. The smallest group size is 8 families. If I don't have 8 participants registered, I can't hold the class, but we never let the group size get any larger than 15, because after you have 15 families, it gets really hard to let everybody speak and participate as fully as we really want this program to be. It's highly interactive. There are a lot of conversations and a lot of processing of information together with other families. And the workshops are held every other week, because what we found was that every week felt like a lot of pressure. These are some big ideas, and it's a lot of information to kind of wrap your mind around in just a week. But when we tried it once a month, we realized that that didn't work either, because people were so busy. This got pushed to the back burner until the night before the workshop. So that wasn't effective either. Every other week seems to be the right time frame, in that it doesn't let too much time go by, but it also gives enough time to really think deeply and process all of the information that's being provided. The benefits to having the groups held electronically: there's no commute. Nobody has to worry about traffic or getting in the car. Don't have to figure out childcare. Doesn't matter if the babysitter doesn't show up. You're not going anywhere. The challenge, though, is that you're not going anywhere, and your child may know that you're there. So we record the meetings, just like this is being recorded tonight, to make sure that every family receives a copy of the recording immediately after the workshop. So if they had to step away and take care of a snack or do assistance for something, they know that they're not going to miss the information. And then it also, oops, let's go back for just one sec. Wasn't quite done with that one. I know it sounded like I got to the bottom of it, but I didn't. And one of the other really good things about meeting in a small group is that families get a chance to share their experiences and start to build a community of other parents who have gone through this process with them. While that is generally what I see, I do want to just kind of identify right now, we don't ask anybody, even upon registration, to identify the disability of their child. We'll ask their child's age, just so we have that demographic, but we don't collect any information about the disability or the nature or severity of the disability, because that's irrelevant to the concern that's felt by the parents. That's irrelevant to the planning that the family needs to do to ensure that good future. The future is going to look very different based on the disability, the degree of the disability, the challenges, the capacities. Everybody is unique. So the groups that we create can be very, very divergent. I have had parents of adults that would have qualified in that grant year alongside parents of children that are 3, 4, 5 years old. We don't have a minimum age. We don't have a maximum age. If a parent is concerned and this is something that they feel that they need to address and they want the information, they're going to be welcome in our program. And one of the benefits of doing it in the small group is to really build those connections and resources and hear the ideas of other parents as we discuss opportunities for connection and how to grow circles of support and how to identify possible career paths and all of those really important things that feel very overwhelming when you're just sitting in a room looking at your child with a piece of paper in your hand trying to figure out like how to fill out this questionnaire for the school. I don't know. So we give you the opportunity to create community in those conversations. Now we're ready to switch this slide. So while we do have a written life plan that is part of the materials for the workshop series, families receive that and we break it into small chunks. At the end of the workshop series, if families have been doing their homework, they will have written material that is theirs to use to share with possible future caregivers, to share with current family members, to use as part of their planning process with Regional Center, to help and alleviate some of the costs with estate planning. But the material remains with the family. It is never collected. It's never sent to me. it remains entirely confidential. I don't ever ask any family to share their life plan. That's the result. That is your proprietary information. But the process of completing it, of actually putting pen to paper and then translating that into a computer document that you can make multiple versions, is a process that is very individual. And I never want a family to feel like, oh, I have to turn this in and somebody is going to be reading it that really, I want to word this just right, or your information is your information. It stays your information. We can go ahead to the next slide. So my biggest goal when I do life planning workshops is to really help families find peace of mind. Because I know from personal experience, from thousands of conversations with families over the years, how much mental anguish can be created just through the course of any day, because there is worry and there is concern and there is awareness and there is frustration and there is joy. There's a lot of emotion involved with being a family who has a special needs member. For parents, for siblings, for the individual themselves, there's a lot of uncertainty. And when that uncertainty is constant and overlaid by a lot of energy that has to be spent in just managing the day-to-day, it feels like I don't have time to do something that's really important to do. So I'm waiting to do it, but it's also waking me up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I need my sleep. So the peace of mind that comes from knowing that I did this, I can check it off my list, and I can do a couple of things. I have now a written document that has not just the overview, not just the highlights, not just the big stuff, but very detailed, broken down information about routines and patterns and needs and celebrations and challenges and opportunities. And it's all in writing. This is something that gives me tremendous peace of mind because I'm healthy. I do what I can, but I also drive on the freeways in San Diego. I personally never thought I would live through a pandemic, but I have. And it taught me that life is pretty unpredictable. And I feel better knowing that no matter what, somebody is going to be able to look at this document that I have created and answer the questions that need to be answered for my son's care. I can think through and process in a calm, quiet, relaxed, supportive environment what is truly non-negotiable in my child's life. What is imperative that is always part of their program when it comes to communication, when it comes to choice, when it comes to inclusion, when it comes to social connections. Where are the pieces that I'm just not willing to compromise about? We know that services are constantly changing. In the last 5 years, self-determination, tailored day services, opportunities and options that did not exist. At the same time, post-pandemic, a tremendous shift to adult programs and how they're provided and the opportunities and circumstances around them. There is always going to be change. And a lot of times we're driving the change. We're asking for more. But when those new opportunities arise, we still have to make a decision about which way we're going to go. And if I have to make a decision in the moment and I haven't had time to think clearly, I'm going to be just kind of doing a knee-jerk first impulse. And I'm not necessarily going to have criteria to weigh that choice against. But if I have a chance to go through a lot of information with lots of conversations, and at the end of it, I have this really clear document, but also a much better understanding of what helps my child be their most successful, empowered self. That becomes my criteria. So when the school calls and says, that program that you signed up for isn't going to work out, and here are the 3 choices that we can give you instead, it's not a crisis. You pull out your checklist of the non-negotiables and you look at it and say, well, option A has no hope. It is so far from what we're looking for. Just take that off the list. Option B has some possibilities. If there were some
There were some
accommodations
accommodations
that could be
that could be
made.
made.
I don't know why all of a sudden I'm hearing an echo. There, it's gone. Okay. There are some accommodations that can be made with option B. That would be great. Option C looks exactly like what we're trying to get, but you just told me that there's a 4-year waiting list. And if my child has to sit in the living room with me for 4 years, not both of us are going to walk out of that living room. So we need something a little bit quicker. Let's talk about the accommodations that would be possible for option B. But it's not an overwhelming process. It's not something that is so challenging because those non-negotiables are already clearly identified for that family. The clear goals and wishes. This is what we're trying to achieve. This is what's driving our decisions. This is how we are electing what services we want to pursue based on those non-negotiables. And here's the training resource. When you're not sure what that means, this is what it looks like around challenge. This is what it looks like around new opportunities. This is where the learning curve, and this is how we introduce and how we prepare for. All of that information is part of the life plan that families have already in writing, already available to help introduce those specific needs to current supports and backups, future caregivers in training, if you like to think of it that way. And then it can also really improve the team and family communication. What I see so often is parents in particular have some family members that get it and quite a few other family members that just don't. They love your child, but they are not babysitters. Never in a million years would you walk away and leave your child with them because they just don't have the patience, or they don't have the recognition, or they don't really understand the dynamic. They say the right words, but they do it with a tone or a body language that's just counterproductive. But having the ability to kind of really clearly share and make available information, provide context, provide explanation, can really help to smooth out some of those bumpy relationships, and also give you, through that increased communication, a much better sense of who can I count on as part of this potential future caregiving scenario, and who is just going to find a different role. They're not going to be a caregiver, but maybe they're going to guard the money instead. They're not going to be a caregiver, but maybe they can be the one who kind of keeps track of the doctor's appointments and medications and that kind of thing, because they're really analytical that way. It just helps open all the possibilities when parents have the opportunity to think things through in that calm, relaxed, supported community of other parents that are all going through the same process. I'm not sure if we have one more slide, or yep, we do. One more slide. This is a program that's funded by Regional Center. We had to fight for that. They told us for 3 years that service coordinators do future planning with families. I said, hang on, I have a service coordinator. I see my service coordinator once a year for about an hour, and we check off the things that are on the checklist. And then they asked me, have I thought about what might happen in the future? And I'm in tears, and that's the end of the meeting. Service coordinators don't have the time or the relationship with families to really effectively do future planning. And after 3 years of us arguing about it, Regional Center agreed, and now they fund our life planning workshop series. So it will generally require an IPP addendum. If this is something that you're interested in, I encourage you to allow time for your service coordinators to create the purchase of service. They will say, oh, we need to add a goal to the IPP and you need to sign this addendum. And I will never have a family wait to begin a life planning workshop series on the paperwork. As long as you have reached out to your service coordinator and they confirm with me that they're aware and they're submitting the funding, I don't hold a family up. I would encourage you to think about registering and participating. I actually have groups that are scheduled to begin next week and the following week. And at this point, while there are registered parents for all of the groups, none of them have enough people registered to start the groups. So I'm going to be reaching out and seeing if some of the groups can combine or switch some days. But ideally, I would love to fill them. I've been doing a lot of speaking getting the information out there. But I encourage you to look at our website. There's more information about the specifics of what we talk about in each of the 5 workshops at the lifeplanninghelp.org website. You'll see the same picture that we started this presentation with, of me and with my son. And then there are the dates of the upcoming workshops that begin both in September, and for those that this is just not a good time, there's also the registration dates for groups that are starting in January. We always have 2 start dates that are coming up, and there are multiple workshops. We make them available in both the evening and the morning on different days of the week, because we really want to make this accessible. This is my passion, helping families figure it out and really improving lives. And I look forward to helping more families. We do also, for those of you that are not part of the regional center or have moved into self-determination, we do accept private pay and self-determination funding. We also are working toward establishing some grants for families that are not with regional center but have similar needs and find that it is cost prohibitive. The cost of the program is just $1,000, $973.25 in total. So we understand that that can be cost prohibitive, and we're working on making some scholarship funds available. So if you find yourself in that situation, you're very interested, please reach out to me by email, wendy@guidinghands.org. And I would be happy to look at your case and see if we have the funds available to help you help support participation. I know that our development department is working on it. I just have to check with them and find out what our status is. So now I'm happy to take questions. And you're still muted. There you go.
There we go.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much, Wendy. So everyone, here's what we're going to do. If you have a question, go ahead and type it into the chat function. And then Eric and I will read it off. And I hope that you caught at the end there, as you guys enter in some of your questions here, the fact that there are other options if you're not a regional center client, you know, as far as going ahead with starting into those classes. And we're so happy Wendy came tonight, because, you know, the fact is that, you know, no matter the disability and what you're facing, we all look at, you know, future planning for our kiddos as they become adults and as we're looking towards those ages. And so it's an important thing to consider all aspects of life planning. And Wendy, as I'm waiting for some chats to come in or some questions to come in, I recall from this class, now I took it years ago already. Our daughter is almost 20 and I took it when she was 12. And that was a time frame when the majority of those in that class were their children were 20 something. They were mainly at the end of transition programming, as in out of the school district, you know, at 22. Some were in the middle of developing their transitions plans within the school district, like you said, at 16. But I was one of the younger families coming to this. And what I loved about it, and I'd love for you to share if you're still doing this, is that you took a holistic approach. And so it was, you covered everything from residential options to job options to leisure activities. What does your child want to do with their free time? To the fact that at that time, self-determination was kind of headed our direction. Now it's here. So would you like to speak a little bit to the structure of the class? Like, what are the topics you cover?
Yes. So when we restructured, we used to have 6 classes in the live workshops, and we have 5 virtual workshops. And we kind of consolidated some information. The first workshop continues to be, why is this so hard? Why is this so important? Because if you don't deal with the emotion, nothing else has a chance to actually make sense. So we really start with the recognition that this is not easy and it's not meant to be, and we have to take it seriously as a group. So we start with the emotion in the first workshop. Then we really look at skills and abilities. What are we starting with? Let's find the positive and attributes and foundation for the future that we want for our child and that they want for themselves. So we really spend some time working on and figuring out, where are the skills, where are the gifts, what are the things that we want to protect and nurture. And once we've identified those, our third workshop, we look at building connections and supports and community, because this is not something you're going to be able to do in isolation. And so many of our goals are about finding connections and finding a community for our child to feel accepted and empowered and important within. And once we figure out what we're working with and what their interests are, then we look at how can we build out from that. And that's where we talk about some leisure activities. We talk about some work opportunities. We talk about kind of finding connections and how to nurture and build them. In our fourth workshop, we do talk about living options, and that is all of the living options. It's never intended to help families like feel pushed in any direction, but it's about providing context about what all of the opportunities and options are, so families can make those informed decisions and really identify what is and is not within their non-negotiables for their family. And then we wind up our virtual sessions with the legal issues. And that is where we talk about things like conservatorship and special needs trusts and the financial planning and needs-based benefits, and how that is all going to fit into what you have identified as the desired future for your child. And then those are the 5 workshops. That's what Regional Center funds, and that's what we bill for. But we also built into the whole program a 6th time frame. And that is the individual session with me. And this is something that you guys didn't get a chance to do. I didn't have it then. But when we were recreating the life planning model, I kept remembering in the live workshops how many times a family would show up a couple of minutes early so they could help me set up and catch me before everybody got there. And how many times someone would stay after and help me clean up and pack the boxes and get stuff out to my car so they could talk to me all the way to my car, maybe 10 or 15 minutes longer, because they had some individual things that didn't necessarily feel comfortable or appropriate to address within the whole group, but they really wanted to kind of give me more information or provide some additional context for me. So it was very important to me that we still had that opportunity for families to have some individual time. So as the workshops end, I make my calendar available, and every participating family will select and schedule a 2-hour individual meeting with me. And I either come to their home, they're welcome to come to my office, or we meet electronically, but it's 2 hours that the family can use for whatever purpose still feels like it's not clear from the entire workshop series, whether that is circling back to information that we talked about earlier in the workshop. It might be brainstorming how to arrive at a future that we're trying to figure out. We kind of know what we want to do, but we're not sure what our first step should be in that direction, or anything. I don't come into that final individual meeting with an agenda at all, but it is my favorite part of the workshop series, because that's where I feel like I'm getting to have the most direct impact and the most helpful conversations with families to really help them fine tune what they have identified through the course of all of the workshops that they want to focus on and move forward with.
Well, I love that, because I think I was one of those that helped you pack up your car at the end of a meeting, and that's tremendously valuable. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, yeah, and just the personal side of it, something I loved what you mentioned. Not every family member is necessarily going to be somebody that's good working with your kid, but then for you to suggest that family members have other strengths. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and just going through the course, the five sections, like the financial piece, maybe they can help in that side. Maybe they can help in, securing some kind of outside work for the kid in the long run. So for like that, working with businesses in the community, reaching out. I mean, there's so many different ideas on how you can bring your family in, even if they're not necessarily work well one-on-one with your kid or able to do that. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I kind of gathered from the workshop, you just mentioned the optional 6th one. So is typically each session about 2 hours each?
They're scheduled to be 2.5 hours. Sometimes we end closer to the 2-hour mark, but I never want to have families not be able to stay to the 2.5 hour mark. I'm very conscious of not going past that. So we might end early, but we never go over.
I would assume that you're leaving some time typically for some question and answers on the topic for the day.
Well, the materials are real. The whole program is designed to be very interactive. So
Mhm.
I don't have families holding questions. I will pause periodically and say, are there questions? Are we ready to move on? Other times the whole process is a conversation, and we don't move on until everybody's had a chance to weigh in or everybody's had a chance to share their example. So it just depends on the topic. Some of them move a little faster if there is a lot of conversation or there's a lot of questioning back and forth with the families. Sometimes we go right up to the buzzer, but it's never more than 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Maybe a question, I know you've said it's all the way from kids that are really young,
Mhm.
all the way to, kids that are in their 30s, maybe even 40s that you're still working with and so forth. What is probably the recommended age bracket that you would have parents work with you, work through the program where they've seen enough, they've experienced enough with their child, and now they're kind of ready to really grasp the next steps and where they're heading?
I think the biggest demographic tends to be the one that is the most effective, kind of that late high school, early adult childhood, or where you're really having to make some big decisions about major directions for services. This is when it's very helpful to kind of step back and say, hang on, I can't make these big decisions until I have a chance to think through what's really critical for us as a family, what's really non-negotiable for my child and how they experience their world. And I have to have that straight before I'm going to feel comfortable making those decisions. At the same time, younger parents who sometimes are just newly diagnosed and like, oh, this is such a new universe to me, not even a new world, it's a new universe to me. I feel like I have to learn and I have to get it now because otherwise I'm going to lose my mind. Any family at any time that they're ready for the information. I don't think there's such a thing as too young. I don't think there's such a thing as too late, too old. I think the sweet spot is they're mature enough that we're not seeing as many sudden shifts in their interests, and they're kind of settling down a little bit. They can focus a tiny bit more. So I have some idea of what to build from. I think the challenge when you're planning for someone who's very, very young is that their interests and their capacities and their kind of foundation is still very much under development.
Yeah.
That's not to say that those parents don't still find a great deal of benefit from the program. It just means that my recommendation to them about how often they're reviewing the materials that they're writing is going to change. So everybody has their written plan. I don't want to say I demand, but I really strongly encourage families to put something on their calendar as a recurring calendar event to review that material annually. So they never have it be out of date. The doctors, the medications, the contacts, the hobbies, the interests, all of that information is always current because we never know when something might happen and when that material might be needed. So we want to make sure that it's relevant and it's current. For younger families, I generally say up to probably 14, from 8 to 14, once a year is not going to be sufficient. Every 6 months. Anything younger than 8, every 3 months. Because if you're working with a 3-year-old and you go back a year later, you might as well start all over because so much has changed. It doesn't feel like you're even working with the same document. So every 3 months for the much younger participants. But as long as they are keeping their materials current, the materials are designed to grow with them. And the concepts and the foundations are something that they can continue to experience. I think you and I just had this conversation before we started the recording. You did the program when your daughter was much younger. And now as a family, you have moved through the process of getting self-determination. And you identified that that was not the smoothest road for you. You had some pushback and there were some conversations. And what I said, and I'm going to just share with everybody because I thought it was funny and it was actually very apropos. I said, well, I hope that pushback was because you knew what was non-negotiable from doing the workshops. And you said, absolutely. That was, you stuck to your guns because you had identified for our daughter, this is what cannot be compromised. And one way or another, we are going to continue to wordsmith this until we find a way to get what we need for her funded through self-determination. but you would not have had that fight. You would not have had that clarity. You would not have had that purpose if you had not, from a younger age, identified this is the direction we want her life to go. And all of the decisions that you've made since then from that area of knowledge have helped you move to the point where now you have this really clear vision that you're willing to put your neck out and stick to your guns to make sure happens. And I think, to me, that's the ultimate beauty of the life planning. I love when I hear from people who have gone through it before, just to kind of let me know what they're up to, or how things are going, or even to ask questions. I had a mom, as we were doing the program redevelopment, I got a voicemail and it said, "You probably don't remember, but 8.5 years ago, I took your class, and now my son is older and we have some new questions. Do you have time to talk?" And I called her back and we talked for about an hour and a half. You know, it's just that this is my passion. This is really what is so important for me, to help families find their reality, their best future, and protect it, and put all of the pieces in place that they can to make sure that it goes the way they want and their child wants.
Yeah, I love that perspective, that it's individual, it's family based. You
Absolutely.
have a question here. So it's asking, and I'm going to ask that if you have like a follow-up detail to this, let us know, go ahead and add to this. But do you have ideas on professional organizations that can help the individual with disability if that person does not have family to support? And then to tag on to that, no, actually, that's simply the first part of the question. So,
okay. So I'm going to say yes and no. We do talk about, in general terms, what is available, what programs can and cannot be held accountable to do, what licensing means, what their guidelines are, what it means to, for example, have a group home. What kind of group home, what kind of staffing can you expect? What are the guidelines that you can hold them accountable to? At the same time, I'm not going to say you need to find this group home and sign up with them, get on their wait list because they're the best. I make absolutely no recommendations for specific programs or services. That's not what this is about. This is not about promoting any specific provider or organization. If families identify, have you heard of them? Are you familiar with them? I will share my opinion. I might share any information that I'm personally familiar with. It is still not a recommendation like, yes, sign up, or no, avoid them. That is not at all. This is as you said, it's a very individual process. So I do share in broad strokes what is available, what are the options, what are the guidelines for those options, but I don't make specific recommendations for specific programs.
Yeah. And then there's another question here.
So I know that you really mentioned and kind of nailed down the area of really kind of, getting this family planning idea. The question is, do you help with the transition area? Can your workshop help, form kind of what a transition plan is going forward? As you're defining what your kid is, you're looking at what's going forward, what's their strengths and weaknesses, who is your kid, and I know going into the self-determination program, having something like All About Abby steers kind of what we really want her to work with. So maybe you can answer to that, like how transition and your workshop work hand in hand.
Well, I think that our workshop gives the space for families to make decisions about the transition and have a better understanding of the kind of long-term impact that they're hoping to have from it. And many of the things that we talk about when we talk about the recreation opportunities, when we talk about work options, many of those are tied into decisions that are being promoted by the school. What foundational skills are we working with? What kinds of future aspirations do they have as far as what they want to do to earn money? Are they going to pursue higher education? Are they going with a diploma? Or are they going to get a certificate? All of those are things that we discuss in, again, those kind of interactive conversations where families kind of share, this is what we have going on, and this is what we've decided, this is what we're leaning toward. And they hear at the same time so many other parents' perspectives. And sometimes that can spark a thought like, oh, I didn't even thought about asking for that. I wonder if, and that's the beauty of doing this in small groups.
I think a follow-up question to that question we just had asked about support when you don't have family around. is to, hold on one sec. So my question is, it says regarding general professional service providers, so not so specific, like you were saying, not so specific, but can provide appropriate services. For example, can an attorney's office manage the financial aspect? So in other words, if you don't have family that can take on the responsibilities,
Right.
or other
And we do identify kind of what the options and resources are that will kind of fill those gaps. So there are things like, if you are conservator for your child and you pass away and there's no one to step up as a replacement conservator, there is an office called public conservator, and they have a job of advocating for and protecting individuals who cannot exercise their legal rights on their own. There are professional fiduciary agents who will step in and manage funds and make sure that they are handled appropriately and dispersed correctly. There are, obviously residential providers and other options to group homes that are also kind of staffed and funded through regional center. And we talk about all of those in kind of varying degrees of detail depending on the composition of the group. There are sometimes it never comes up because these are families that are well connected. They have a lot of different family members. They have a strong foundation and community. But there are times where I have single parents, there are no siblings, there's no extended family. Where are their options? So absolutely, we talked about all of that.
That's great.
So a really good question came up, talking about kind of the legal aspects of having a special needs child. When would you recommend getting a special needs trust, and then also like the power of attorney or conservatorship over your child? Like starting the planning process. Obviously, conservatorship is at 18, but start thinking in that direction.
Well, you should start thinking about whether that's the right direction at about 16. And if you feel that it is, you should start actually taking action at about 17 and a half as far as conservatorship. When it comes to special needs trusts and financial planning, I don't think it's ever too soon to create the box, which is the special needs trust. It's the joinder agreement. It just establishes it as a legal entity. The reason I say it's never too soon to create the box is so that it's there to be a recipient for anybody who wants to gift your child with anything that could put them over the legal kind of threshold for eligibility for needs-based benefits. So if you have grandparents that are going to provide equally for all of their grandchildren, and your child with a disability is going to get, $10,000 from grandma, that just means that they're going to have to use that to live on for however long it takes to get under $2,000 before they're going to be able to use SSI for their living expenses. That's not what grandma wanted. She wanted those $10,000 to be for their benefit. So having a special needs trust ready to receive them means that your child with a disability can inherit equally with their cousins. Your grandparent can do what they want to do and gift their grandchildren equally, but it's never going to become an impediment that's going to mean that they're not eligible for any kind of needs-based service. So I don't think there's too soon a time to think about creating a special needs trust. You don't have to fund it. That means you don't have to put your own money into it. My feeling is very much, I'm alive, I'm kicking, I'm buying everything for my son. Doesn't make sense for me to put the money in the special needs trust just to take it back out and buy stuff. I would rather just buy stuff for him. But my life insurance policy has a beneficiary, which is his special needs trust. So I'm not here to do it myself. Then the trust will be funded, but it's created now because he has grandparents and other people that, it's ready to receive funds from somebody other than myself as well.
Yeah,
and great
that's
advice. And maybe, along that line, not everybody may be familiar, but how does CalAble maybe work into that plan as well? I know we've had other.
Yeah, CalAble is a whole different program, and it has different guidelines. It has different outcomes. It also has different uses. My feeling is very much that there are pros and cons to both CalAble and special needs trusts. And I feel the strongest financial planning for a family is to have both. The CalAble that allows the individual to save their own money, to have some opportunities to be in control of the budgeting and spending and practice those financial responsibility skills, but the special needs trust to protect the bulk of funds that are available without their control. Primarily the bulk because for people that are not aware, CalAble has a payback clause built into it. So at your child's passing, any funds that are still in their CalAble account automatically get paid back to the state for their needs-based benefits that they received from the time the CalAble account was opened. So if I open in a CalAble account today, anything that was in it when my son passed away, they would say, oh, since 2023, you know how much we've paid for your Social Security and your Medi-Cal? All of that's coming to us. So whereas a special needs trust, the family has a lot more control. There's no payback clause for a third-party special needs trust. So the family gets to decide what's left, what's to be done with anything that's still in the trust when their child passes away. My personal goal is for my son to spend all but $5 before he goes.
That's great.
Yes.
That is such good detail. Just looking at a few things for families to know. If you believe that your child needs conservatorship, we do recommend making sure that you're at least getting ahead of the 18-year-old deadline by at least 6 months. Many lawyers are saying that it's taking that long for the court systems to really process and do everything correctly. And so it's important that you know that going into it, if that's something that you're looking at. And not always is that the case. But there are other options with conservatorship as well. There's different powers that you'll want to know about too. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I really don't want people to leave this with the idea that, oh, if I don't have conservatorship by the time they're 18, the world is going to collapse and end. That's not the case at all. There is actually no problem with your child not being conserved at their 18th birthday. Generally speaking, particularly for the schools and for physicians, they can give verbal consent for you to be present for meetings, to receive information, to participate in the decision-making around their care. And that is still respected. And as a parent, you have the opportunity to continue to participate to the degree that you had prior to their 18th birthday. They just have to give consent for that because legally they are entitled to make that decision on their own. And because of privacy laws around healthcare in particular, you will no longer be able to schedule your child's doctor's appointments. They will call and say, can I speak to your child? And your child has to take the phone and say, talk to my mom, and hand it back to you. And as long as they do that, you can still be part of the picture. So even though I do recommend, if you really truly understand that conservatorship is absolutely going to be the right choice for your family, and there are absolutely circumstances where that's the case, 6 months to get the paperwork going. If the courts take a little bit longer, there's nothing that's going to be catastrophic in those 2 or 3 months, particularly if you have the petition, it's working its way through the court, you have the filed paperwork. So a lot of times that is kind of an additional weight in your corner if your child doesn't necessarily have good capacity to say, please let my mom come in the room, I want her here for this.
Yeah. And it's just important to know too that there's different powers, there's different levels. We did
other options short of conservatorship that we also discuss. Yeah,
exactly. There's lots of options, so that's important to know. And then I was just going to say as well, okay, did we have another question? I'm so sorry.
I think down here.
Okay. All right. And then just one sec, let me see here. Okay, do you know how to add a conservator to the conservatorship after conservatorship has been established?
Yes, it's a different petition, and the legal clinic can help you do that.
Yeah, that's good.
And these resources you're talking about, are they available? Do you have a link or so forth that we can, have links to some of those for our people, or they go through the workshop and find those?
During the workshop, I share the links and share some resources. Some general information as far as what we talk about. Those topics are on the website lifeplanninghelp.org. And then just about every link that I share is something that you could Google. If you go to San Diego courts, you will find the probate page and all kinds of information, including links to the conservatorship clinic. If you Google SSI or CalAble, they have their own account. They have their own links to those things. So we share those, but they're all public access and easy to find just by Googling.
I super appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions in different areas, perhaps? We also have the resource as Hope on the Hard Road of the podcast that we do We have a lot of these different topics on there as well for extra information. We've had lawyers come in, et cetera, that speak to conservatorship, SSI resources, CalAble, self-determination, a lot of the things that, you know,
HSS.
exactly,
Mhm.
that are also discussed in this program. So
I will say that
yeah.
one of the things that I am very firm about, I get inquiries all the time. Can I just come to the class about living options? Can I just come to the legal issues? And the answer is no. This
Mhm.
is not this is not a 2-hour presentation about just those topics. This is an ongoing exploration, and the materials are designed to build upon themselves. The concepts are designed to grow with you. So by the time you get to the legal issues, you're not just hearing information about legal issues, you are thinking about, what do I need to put in place legally to make sure that the plan we've created happens that way? And it's a very different mindset. It's a very different result than just attending an informational presentation about this legal issue without having the context of, I have carefully considered for more than 8 hours now what I want that future to look like. So
Mhm.
I have very specific questions. I have very specific information that I'm trying to mine from this presentation. So I do agree that there are wonderful individual presentations out there, and I will direct people to those. But
Mm.
life planning, the workshop series, you can't just take one, because it's designed to be done in its entirety.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
I
like
think,
a holistic approach, which is really valuable. It really is.
yeah, I'm curious too, as you've been doing this, how often does that material, make adjustments or change too? So, we know that a lot of the laws will slight modifications, rights might change, some of the legal aspects. Maybe you could clue us in on maybe something that's happened recently and some of the laws have changed and how that impacts parents.
Well, the most apparent thing is there was a new law that was passed this year around conservatorship, around the prerequisites that need to be in place prior to a conservatorship being granted, and also changing some of the guidelines as far as how easy it is to get out of a conservatorship when it's no longer necessary. That's just the biggest example that I'm familiar with right now. But you're right, there are always adjustments to laws and information. The materials in their most general sense
Mhm.
remain the same. But my experience has been that, doing this for, goodness, 14, 15 years now, I have never had two groups that experience the materials the same way. Because while we have the big topics that we're going to be talking about, they are always through the filter of the lived experience of the participants. And depending on the dynamic of the group and what their experiences have been and what they're specifically there to work through, we're going to have different conversations.
Mhm.
So the materials in general are pretty fixed, but how they are experienced by each group is very unique. And
Mhm.
we do like when we did the program redesign, when we moved it to electronic format, I really did some reorganization and kind of moved some topics around to try and get a little bit of a different flow, knowing that we were going to be doing it electronically. But in general, I review the materials regularly, and I'm always looking for ways to tweak it. But the biggest tweaks come from the participation and the way the conversations go with the participants.
Yeah, I love the fact
Well,
how dynamic it is. That's really,
absolutely. Absolutely. And our families all experience different things and have different dynamics, like you said, to consider. So, Wendy, thank you so very much. This is really just a valuable topic in general to be thinking about what your family needs, in all of these different areas, this sort of holistic approach to future planning, life planning, and taking all those things into consideration. So, thank you for presenting tonight and just bringing to mind the fact that we already live a certain level of stress, and so some of this is very helpful for relieving that stress. Just being able to think through, what would my child want, what would the siblings want, what would I want, and then how to get there. And so classes like this are amazing because you can sort of gather your resources. You come out with a resource manual that you can go back to again and again and look into. So Thank you, Wendy, for
Mhm.
everything you do. And again, Wendy, go ahead and tell us again your email address.
Yes.
I don't have the slide up, but
Okay. My email address is Wendy, WENDY, at guidinghands, GUIDINGHANDS.org, ORG. And the website for registration or more information about life planning is lifeplanninghelp.org.
Oh, super.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you
So
guys.
appreciate you coming.
We
Very much
really
for
hope you
the
guys
opportunity.
got some good information out of this, and you know, maybe just has you thinking about a few things, and that this was helpful. So thank you for joining us tonight, and
Yes.
everyone have a good night.